Flies after it, gets away, fires a long one, Wade's open, touchdown!
Beating Georgia, we realized then that we could beat the big boys and we could play with those guys. We belonged. That was very important.
The change in support of the ball club has been dramatic. Because when I came here, we had only maybe 17, 18,000 fans in the stadium, and the stadium seated 33,000. And they were enthusiastic, but to compare that with what's happened today, it's unbelievable.
We didn't have to put up with Clemson for the 4 years I was there because we always beat them.
Back when the Big Thursday was in its heyday, merchants around South Carolina sold more women's fashions, more clothes than they did at Easter, because if you went out there, you'd never see a woman without a hat on and a dress and a corsage, which they received from their gentlemen friends.
I think the best thing that ever could happen is when we went to Michigan and we beat Michigan in Michigan.
Gary Harper hands off to George Rogers. He's down to the 20, 15, hit, gets away at the 10, to the 5, dives into the end zone. Touchdown, Carolina.
The headgear is just a single piece of leather, practically no padding in the top, and just the flaps to come out over your ears and then a strap under your chin. That's about all it was. Literally no protection.
The opening lines to the University of South Carolina alma mater. Known by the thousands who call this place their alma mater, and by the thousands more who have adopted it as their own. I'm Ron Franklin. 1992 marks the 100th anniversary of one of the greatest legacies in college athletics. It's a perfect time to remember the days and look back at the first 100 years of Gamecock football.
It is doubtful if there is a college in the state that takes as little interest in athletics as we do.
Strong words published in the campus newspaper of the South Carolina College in 1891. A disgruntled student reporter urged the college to follow the lead of other universities by fielding its own football team. This new sport, it seems, had become all the rage. But unfortunately, the students' plea could not have come at a worse time. The country was in depression, and enrollment at the college had dropped to only 73 students by 1892. And so, Carolina's first football game was played without faculty permission on Christmas Eve, 1892 in Charleston. No photographs have survived of that first ragtag bunch, but the local paper reported the Carolina boys wore regular football shirts with red caps, and many of the supporters were wearing the school colors, garnet and black, on their lapels. Carolina was beaten by a much more experienced Furman team, but the student paper was optimistic.
Of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest of these, it might have been. But the most consoling and just as terse are these few words, it might have been worse.
The faculty finally gave in, and the first official Carolina football game was played against Georgia in 1894. The first victory came the following year when Carolina defeated a by then despised Furman team 14-10. The next year, Carolina hired its first coach, R.S. Whaley. He coached the team for just one season and won only one game, but what a win. His 1896 team won the first ever Carolina-Clemson game 12-6. Carolina's first truly successful season came in 1902. That's when C.R. Williams took over the helm, and he led his teams through two brilliant campaigns back-to-back. Some credit the 1903 team with the only 8-win season before 1979.
There was a lot of how-overs in there that they played teams like Welch Neck and the Columbia Y, so this wasn't a legitimate 8-win season. However, they did also defeat Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Tennessee, which dignified the record a little bit more.
The Gamecocks under Williams achieved another first. They were the first to officially be called Gamecocks. Before then, the team had used several nicknames, including the Jaguars and the Jackals. In those days, a player had to have a strong will and a strong jawbone to go with it. The only protection worn in the early years was a crude wooden nose guard, shown here hanging around the players' necks. Before long, reports surfaced of maimings and even deaths attributed to the sport. And in 1906, after 4 winning seasons, the trustees banned football. Feeling pressure from the fans, the board reinstated football the next year, but by then the school's winning momentum had been lost. By 1920, the administration began to see the equation. Quality football translates into alumni donations. The answer, Saul Metzger. With 16 years of experience, he became Carolina's first big-name coach.
He was just a good all-around coach. He believed in fundamentals, and he spent most of his time blocking and tackling and charging, and the best part of his coaching was getting us in condition. We made wind sprints, and we were in excellent condition.
The fans loved Metzger, who coached for 5 successful seasons, highlighted by his 1924 team that went 7-3. Metzger retired in 1925, but the Birds, as they were often called, continued to win under his successor, Branch Bocock. He may be best remembered for a shocking decision he made in 1926. Early in a game with Clemson, he asked his star center, Bill Boyd, to try an incredibly long field goal. Boyd's kick hit the crossbar and it bounced through. His unprecedented 47-yard placement remained a South Carolina record until 1971. By the late 20s, Furman had become a purple problem for the Gamecocks. After 5 straight losses to the Paladins, the board saw only one solution: hire Furman's coach. Tricky Billy LaBelle brought to Carolina the same imagination and discipline that had made the Paladins so successful. LaValle's teams produced 7 straight winning seasons. Included was a 6-0 upset over nationally ranked Chicago in 1928.
Back then, Chicago was a member of the Big Ten, and in fact won the Big Ten championship several times, and they were coached by one of the greatest and immortal coaches, Amos Alonzo Stagg, and so that was a great victory.
Fans in those days noticed some other changes with LaValle's teams. One was the bullseye uniforms, shown in this painting of 1932 team captains Bill Gilmore and Harry Freeman. Before then, the attire had always been canvas pants with plain garnet jerseys. In 1931, another change came to Carolina. 3 co-eds joined the cheering squad, which before then had been exclusively male. The sidelines would never be the same. Up until this time, most of the games had been played at old Melton Field, which sat here in the central part of the campus, in fact, right where the Russell House is today. But by the mid-30s, those wooden stands became inadequate for the number of faithful that were coming in to watch them play each week. So the Gamecocks decided to move 2 miles in that direction, and they're still playing there today. Columbia Municipal Stadium was christened in 1934 by a pouring rain and 10,000 drenched fans. They watched the Cocks drum VMI 22-6. The 17,600-seat facility was built by the city on land purchased from Columbia Dairies. When this photo was taken, the milk cows were grazing in the background. Later, the stadium was turned over to the university, and the name changed to Carolina Stadium. In 1938, USC hired its 19th head football coach, Rex Enright, by far the highest paid Gamecock coach ever. Enright pulled down a cool $5,500 a year. He employed the same offense used during his playing days under the legendary Nuke Rockne at Notre Dame.
In the era that I played, we did not play the T formation. It was a single wing. We played the Notre Dame system, or the double wing system.
Support for Enright never waned, despite losing marks in 4 of his first 5 seasons. Maybe because of his likable personality, or maybe because of his skills as athletic director.
He got Carolina into playing big-time schedules, and we were playing such teams as Army and Tennessee, and even back then, Villanova and Fordham were football powers, and South Carolina played them back in those days. He said, as an athletic director, I'm a genius, but as head coach, I'm out of my mind, because he was scheduling the game, and then he had to coach against them.
It was against Tennessee in 1942 that Enright produced one of the greatest games ever played by the Garnet and Black, a 0-0 tie. It was the only blemish for a volunteer team that went undefeated and won the Sugar Bowl.
We were training to try to stop the running attack of Tennessee. And we incorporated most of the time, and I was calling defensive signals, and we were incorporating most of the time a 7-man line. And I played in the line, I guess, 65 to 70% of that game. And our 7-man line stopped Tennessee most of the day.
Tennessee's Big Orange weren't the only volunteers that year. Football at USC was sidelined as players joined the war effort. Even Enright himself went to war before the '43 season. Carolina's most unusual season had to be the 1945 campaign under interim coach Johnny McMillan. This rare color film shows a little single-wing razzle-dazzle that Cox tried in a loss to Alabama. But after that, the Gamecocks scratched their way to 3 straight ties, including one with heavily favored Wake Forest. Wake and USC had developed a small rivalry, and the fans were anxious for a rematch. At the same time, a group of Florida businessmen were starting a new bowl game and thought the rematch would be a great draw. So on New Year's Day, despite a 2-3-3 record, South Carolina played its first ever bowl game in the first ever Gator Bowl. By the end of World War II, Gamecock football had come a long way, particularly from those days when they simply worried about having enough people to field a team, to their very first bowl bid. Granted, 22 head coaches had come and gone, but most importantly, so had hundreds of devoted Gamecock football players, many of whom distinguished themselves as greats of their day. One of the first true standouts was a versatile fullback from St. Matthews, Tatum Wanamaker Gressett. In 1920, Gressett's running, passing, and kicking brought the Birds their first victory over Clemson in 8 years.
I threw a pass back to the left, about a 40-yard pass to Dave Robinson. He carried it down to the 30-yard line. Well, we were down there, and we tried 3 plays, and it was still 4th and 10. And we called timeout to determine what play to run next. And some of them wanted to run an end run, some of them wanted to throw a pass. And I told them, I said, look, if you keep those fellas off of me for 2 seconds, I'll get us 3 points. I knew I could because my leg was grooved, and I knew I could kick it. And sure enough, they called the drop kick, and I dropped back, and the ball was snapped, and I put it down, and it went between the goalposts, 3-0, and that was the final outcome of the game.
A decade later, another great runner made his mark at Carolina. Earl Clary, the Gaffney Ghost, was known for his ability to break tackles and tightrope down the sideline. Following a win over Clemson, then assistant coach Frank Howard said, "Nobody as good as Clary has any business on the side opposite Tiger folks." Ironically, Carolina's first All-American wasn't a runner or passer. Lou Sossaman played offensive and defensive center, an excellent blocker and a standout on defense. Sossaman will be remembered as Carolina's greatest two-way lineman.
And it was quite an honor. I was at a dance that night. We had a fraternity dance, a sorority dance going. And the news came in about 10:30, 11 o'clock from the Associated Press, and they announced it that night at the dance. And I was very thrilled and honored, and have always been honored to have played at the University of South Carolina, and delighted that I could have made All-American.
After the war, the soldiers returned, and so did America's passion for college football. South Carolina fans greeted their star players back on campus, and also their beloved head coach, Rex Enright. And he wouldn't disappoint them. Enright would bring national prominence to this campus and begin a brand new era of Gamecock football.
When I first came to Carolina in 1952, Carolina played a very conservative type of football. In fact, Rex Enright was the coach at that time, and a lot of times ran out of what they called the short punt or straight T formation.
Yeah, I think one year we set a record here with 1,000 yards passing. And, you know, that was unheard of. And now they do that in sometimes 2 or 3 games.
Enright used his no-frills offense to dominate Clemson, and he always seemed to be good for at least one major upset per season.
In the early 50s, the Gamecocks played Virginia in a Shrine-sponsored game at Norfolk during the regular season called the Oyster Bowl. And Virginia had a great team. They ended up 8-2 that year. They lost to Duke. It was the only other game they lost, but they were leading the Gamecocks 14-0 in the 4th quarter, and Carolina scored 21 points in 1 minute and 45 seconds to win that game 21-14.
Rex Enright found his greatest success in 1953. Led by quarterback Johnny Gramley, the Cocks racked up victories against the Citadel, Virginia, Furman, and Clemson. But Gamecock fans may best recall the historic game against North Carolina. It was the first ever home game to be televised. WIS-TV was signing on the air, and the Battle of the Two Carolinas was its inaugural broadcast. The game was never close. USC's dominating defense turned back the Tar Heels time and again, and the home team prevailed 18-0. An upset victory over West Virginia prompted the Gamecocks' first ever ranking in the national polls. The 1953 squad finished at 7-3 and was ranked as high as 15th during the year. Enright's propensity for pulling off the big upset continued in the opening game of 1954.
Earl Blake was in one of his final seasons when Army was one of the favorites to be a national champion at that year. And in fact, they did end up ranked 8th in the nation, but South Carolina went up and defeated them 34-20 at West Point. That was the biggest win at that time against a real quality team, and gave Carolina fans another array of hope that that they were beginning to compete in, quote, the big time.
His health failing, Enright resigned as head coach in 1955, but stayed on as athletic director until 1960. His 15-year tenure as head coach remains the longest in school history. The athletic department building, the Roundhouse, is named in his honor.
Rex Enright, to me, was one of the most outstanding men I have ever known. He was just a gentleman.
If I had to be critical of Coach Enright, the only thing that I could say, he was too nice a guy. And he probably should have been a little tough on us from time to time.
If Enright was too soft, his replacement was just the opposite. 32-year-old Warren Gizet came to campus with a reputation for hard-nosed football.
After Rex left and Warren Gizet came in from Maryland, he played a very conservative brand of football. They called it 3 yards and a cloud of dust. And if we threw the ball 3 or 5 times a game, that was something.
I wanted him to open up the offense because all we had 6 plays to the right, 6 plays to the left, and no forward pass. I mean, as we know it today, with the quarterback dropping back.
Offenses in those days, the split T was the name of the favorite offense, and it was a totally geared to running, except that the way you would pass it, call it a running pass. A halfback would run and pass. The quarterbacks were big quarterbacks and generally runners.
Although criticized for his ultra-conservative approach, Gizet stuck with it and won, including a huge upset over Duke in only his second game.
We hadn't beaten them since 1945, and King Dixon scored a touchdown, and we held on to a lead. We made a goal line stand. Sonny Jurgensen was quarterback at Duke, and we made a goal line stand and kept them on the 1-yard line for 4 plays.
Gizet's 1956 team rolled to a 7-3 record, and the Garnet Believers thought their pigskin messiah had arrived. But the 57 squad struggled to a 5-5 mark. The only highlight, a come-from-behind victory over Texas.
We played out in Texas. We played Darrell Royals. It was his first game as coach of University of Texas. And King Dixon ran the opening kickoff back 98 yards for a touchdown.
Then Texas came back and built a 20-7 or 21-7 lead on us, and in 6 minutes time, going into the fourth quarter, we scored 3 touchdowns on them. The most memorable one was Alex Hawkins scored a 26-yard run on to the left. We were penalized 5 yards for offsides. We called the same play, and this time he went 31 yards for a touchdown.
Gizet stepped down following the 1960 campaign. A local sports writer, Jake Penland, may have been partially responsible for his decision. He often wrote scathing articles dubbing the coach Keeper of the Kremlin in reference to Gizet's closed practice sessions in a baseball park.
I remember Frank Howard and I, who were, I think, really good friends, after I'd finished coaching and he'd finished coaching, he said one day, he said, "You know, Warren," he said, "when you practiced on that practice field," he said, "down there by the roundhouse," he said, "we watched your practices getting ready for the Clemson game all the time." He said, "We had somebody sitting up on one of those porches in a rocking chair," and he just told me that we had our practices observed.
Warren Gizet ended his reign with 28 wins, 21 losses, and 1 tie. Although he was straight-laced and by the book, he didn't lack for imagination.
He was quick to experiment with different things. He had written several books on the split T offense along the line. He was an innovator and a very creative person, and one, as I say, demanded a lot of you and got a lot out of you.
Neither Gizet nor Enright was blessed with excellent facilities. Gizet did, however, oversee the second expansion of Carolina Stadium, bringing seating capacity to more than 42,000. Both men were blessed with exceptional football players, including a few who will be remembered with Carolina's best. Before the 60s, quarterbacks at USC were recruited for their legs, not their arms. The one exception was Johnny Grambling. From 1951 through 53, he passed for more than 2,000 yards and was the first Gamecock to pass for more than 1,000 yards in a single season.
Quarterback Johnny Grambling fires. Mike Caskey at the 10. 5, touchdown.
The best usually don't come in pairs, but that's exactly what happened when King Dixon and Alex Hawkins came to Columbia in 1955. Off the field, they were oil and water. But on the field, they were the perfect combination of mental and physical toughness.
Alex Hawkins was a great two-way player. At one time or another, he led Carolina in rushing, passing, and receiving, which is right unusual. He also kicked extra points, and he was our best defensive back.
If you look at both sides, offense and defense, without a doubt, and I think most people would agree with me, he was the best football player that Carolina ever had.
Alex was as tremendous a competitor as I've ever met in my life, one dedicated to winning and giving 105%. We've often thought what it would have been like if Alex really worked hard during the week.
Alex became known for his rebellious antics and his constant run-ins with Gizet.
I slammed his football on the desk, and I said, "I quit." Well, neither one of us knew what that meant. I quit, but I stormed out of his office, and he called King Dixon and Dwight Keith, the other 2 captains, in. He said, "We've got a real problem with one of our captains." Well, they generally surmised who it was since I was the only one not there. He said, "One of our captains is either having a nervous breakdown or he's gone crazy." So they looked at each other and said, "You're probably talking about Hawkins."
The greatest thing about King was his leadership capabilities, and I believe he was president of the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior classes at Carolina, just all the way through. He was not only a team leader, but a leader throughout the university. In fact, he ran for the House of Representatives at 21 years of age, as I recall, and lost by a few votes.
King was mature when I first met him, and he was 18 years old, and he was mature as most people are at 35. He just had his stuff together early, and he was just exceptional. I've never seen him do anything or bend a rule, much less break one.
They say no one can do it alone, and so was the case with Steve the Cadillac Wadiak. Despite playing on but one winning team, he is certainly one of South Carolina's all-time gridiron greats. From 1948 through 1951, he stiff-armed his way to 2,878 yards, a record that stood until George Rogers broke it in 1980.
He was the kind of guy that could run over you or run around you. He had extreme balance. Opposing coaches would say, okay, you let Graham and Wilson and Bennett do what the heck they want to do. You just watch Wadiak, stop him, and you'll stop the whole shooting match.
In March of 1952, less than 4 months after his final game at USC, Steve Wadiak died in a tragic car crash. But the legacy of the Cadillac lives on. His jersey number 37 was the first to be retired by the university. And each year, the team's most valuable player receives the Steve Wadiak Award.
Carolina's ball, first and goal at the Clemson 2. Quarterback Mackie Prickett takes to Carl Brazel.
Another star who came to Carolina after World War II never put on a helmet or ran for a touchdown. But he's a major player in Gamecock history just the same. In 1952, Bob Fulton began his remarkable career as the Gamecocks play-by-play announcer. Except for 2 seasons, he's been the voice of the Gamecocks ever since.
I think Bob Fulton is a legend, and he's a wonderful guy to work with, and I think the day that he retires, South Carolina fans are going to go through a shock when they turn that radio dial and his voice is not there. I think the person following him will have the same problems as the first person following a Bear Bryant.
Until the early 60s, players went both ways. They played on offense and they also played on defense. But then came rules changes that allowed for unlimited substitution, and the specialty player changed the game forever, thus ushering in a modern era of Gamecock football. When Coach Gizet resigned, the head coaching reins were handed over to his former top assistant, Marvin Bass. A favorite with the players, Bass's relaxed style was a huge change from the almost militaristic approach of Gizet.
I had a very close relationship with Coach Bass. I felt very close to him because he was that type of a person. He wanted, I think the image of him being like a father figure for the players. He tried to treat the players the way he would like to be treated.
Unfortunately, Bass was never able to find success as head man. He resigned and made way for another big-time coach in 1966. Paul Dietzel had won a national championship at LSU, and Carolina fans could already savor the taste of that elusive championship pie.
Paul Dietzel was always one of my favorite people. I never met a man who was more positive in his thinking than Paul was. And he was interested in a lot of things outside of coaching football. He even changed the Gamecock logo. He developed a new fight song at Carolina.
1966 would be remembered as Dietzel's disaster. The team lost 9 games, the most by any Gamecock team before or since. But Dietzel was an excellent recruiter, and supporters knew he was building for the future.
Coach Dietzel is really the reason I went to South Carolina. I think he's a great visionary, great salesman.
Ultimately, Dietzel's vision came true in 1969. The cockpit was packed with over 42,000 fans for the opener against ACC rival Duke. They went wild when All-American Warren Muir capped off a drive with this fourth-quarter touchdown. The Cocks slipped by the Devils 27-20. Late-game heroics made the difference the following week as well. Fred Ziegler propelled the Birds past North Carolina with this acrobatic catch. The fifth game against Virginia Tech was another nail-biter. With less than a minute left in the game, the Cocks trailed by 2 points. That's when Tommy Suggs took charge. Passing and scrambling, he led his offense 49 yards in 49 seconds. And with only 9 seconds left, Billy Dupree kicked a 47-yard field goal to give Carolina a 17-16 win. The team's reward came later on November the 15th. Led by Suggs' 3 touchdown passes, the Cocks smashed Wake Forest 24-6 and collected Carolina's first ever ACC football championship. The following week, Coach Dietzel made a much-anticipated announcement.
One of the things we said was, if you come to Carolina, I don't want you to come here unless you're planning to win the ACC title. And you've done that, and I congratulate you. And the other thing is, I didn't want you to come here unless you wanted to play in a bowl game. And of course, I got to tell you the truth and tell you that on December the 30th, the University of South Carolina is the host team in the Peach Bowl round.
The '69 Peach Bowl was Carolina's first bona fide bowl appearance. Their opponent was West Virginia, led by a fiery young coach named Jim Carlin. Heavy rains made the field and the play sloppy, and the Gamecocks fell to the Mountaineers 14-3. But neither the weather nor the loss could dampen Garnet's spirits. Gamecock football was back in the limelight.
I remember the basketball team had their opening inter-squad game with Coach McGuire and those guys. And Ziegler and I went to the game like most students and fans did, and we must have had 10 or 12,000 there for this inter-squad game. And I remember not being able to watch the game because people come in to get your autographs and all. And that's exciting, and that makes it all worthwhile.
As with Enright, Paul Dietzel may be remembered more for his prowess as athletic director than head coach. He was an excellent fundraiser and cheerleader, and he built first-class facilities, including the Roost, shown here in this 1969 recruiting film.
The facility houses 166 student athletes. Inside the Roost, the student athletes are served meals which are not only delicious, but are served family style.
Another of Dietzel's achievements was evident on opening day 1971, when over 54,000 fans filled the newly expanded Carolina Stadium. This also marked the first home game to be played on artificial turf. Dietzel's fake grass never really caught on, though, and was eventually removed in 1983. Dietzel's most controversial move was convincing South Carolina to leave the ACC in 1971. The university had experienced long-standing disagreements with the conference over academic requirements and recruiting. Feeling he could take the athletic program no further, Dietzel resigned in 1974. Jim Carlin was a straight-talking Tennessean who had played his college football at Georgia Tech. He came to Columbia in 1975, determined to bring winning back to Carolina.
He was the only person, I think, that could have come in here and got everybody to pull in one direction, to have a good attitude, and to believe that they could win.
We'd done that at West Virginia and Texas Tech prior to coming here. And so we've been a staff for a long time. We understood that you convince the players play as hard as they can play, don't promise anybody anything. And those players played awfully hard for us. Some of those that were average or less got to where they played better than average.
Carlin adopted a lot of average players when he arrived, but he also found a few greats, like senior quarterback Jeff Grants and running backs Clarence Williams and Kevin Long. They were the keys to Carlin's Veer offense, which averaged nearly 30 points a game. In '75, they cruised to victories over Georgia Tech, Baylor, and Ole Miss, and ended a successful 7-4 season by thrashing Clemson 56-20. Carlin's Gamecocks' next successful season didn't come until 1979. A junior running back named George Rogers was making headlines across the country and was surrounded by a group of athletes who could play Carlin-style football.
I think you play defense. I think you keep the other team from beating you, and you play the kicking game. Then I think you get a running game that you can control to keep your defense from being on the field all the time.
After an opening loss to North Carolina, the 79 team reeled off 5 straight victories, including a thriller between the hedges in Athens.
Now it's Carolina from the Georgia 16-yard line. Back to throw is Gary Harper. Looks to the end zone, fires one. It is caught by Willie Scott. Touchdown, Carolina.
Rogers and his teammates romped to an 8-3 record, the best by any Gamecock team to that point, and accepted an invitation to the Hall of Fame Bowl.
Up that defense, probably an 8-man front. Rogers breaks up the middle. 45, 50, down to the 40.
Carolina opened the 1980 campaign by rolling over 2 meager opponents, including a record 73-0 slaughter of Wichita State. Then, after a hard-fought loss to Southern Cal, the Garnet and Black traveled north to make history.
They played Michigan in front of 102,000 fans at Ann Arbor and defeated Michigan to really rise in the national polls, and George Rogers had a good day, which raised his stock, and probably was the one that really got the attention of the national media.
They was debating, the coaches were debating who's going to go out first, right? Who's going to go out there on the field first. And this is at halftime, you know, going to see who go out on the field first. And we didn't want to go out first, and they didn't want to go out first. So we started going out first, and then they started coming out. They just knocked us over, man, just ran over us, knocked us down, get out of the way, we're going on the field and stuff like that. And I guess everybody on that team said, we're going to kick their butt. And that's what we did. We went out there and we beat them.
Play action pass. Going to be dumped back on the 44-yard line.
Carlin's team went on to their second straight 8-3 season. Unfortunately, they'd lost their second straight bowl game, falling to national power Pittsburgh in the Gator Bowl. Despite Carlin's success in 1980, things turned sour soon after that. For reasons never made public, he was fired after the 1981 season.
Probably the problem that Jim had above everything else was his problem with the media and with some of the fans. I always liked Carlin because he never talked out of both sides of his mouth. If he didn't like you, he would tell you. And probably he told some people that he should not have told that to.
Carlin's replacement, Richard Bell, succumbed to a similar fate. He was released after only 1 season for refusing to fire 4 assistant coaches, directly disobeying athletic director Bob Markham. And so Joe Morrison knew he was in for a cockfight when he stepped into the ring in 1983. But Joe Morrison was a pro. He had spent 14 years in the NFL, playing 8 different positions for the New York Giants. It was the man in black who would return glory to the Gamecocks.
I don't know. It was something unique about the guy. I think it was a mystique about him. He was a quiet man, a man of very few words, and people like that are intriguing.
The only thing intriguing about Morrison's first season as the new head man was the theme song. In 1983, the university first used the theme from 2001, A Space Odyssey, to stir the emotions of the home crowd. It has become one of the grandest entrances in all of college sports, a fitting prelude to 1984. After the season opener of 1984, most pigskin prognosticators left the Gamecocks off their team-to-watch list. That first game against the Citadel should have been a cakewalk, but it took a halfback pass with only 1:10 left in the game to escape with a 31-24 win.
He's going to throw a pass deep. He's got Wade at the 3, touchdown.
Plays like that would eventually be attributed to black magic after Morrison's customary all-black attire. The team settled down the following week, rolling over Duke 21-0, and setting the stage for a showdown with Georgia.
There was a different type of feeling in the locker room prior to the game. It was a quietness that I've never been around. I mean, you could just look in the guy's eyes and you could tell that this was something different.
With the score tied late in the second half, reserve quarterback Mike Hold replaced an injured Alan Mitchell. He quickly connected on a 62-yard bomb to Ira Hillary. A few plays later, Hold went in on this keeper, giving the Gamecocks the win 17-10. After the Bulldogs, Carolina drilled Kansas State 49-21 and followed with an impressive 45-21 pounding of Pittsburgh. By now, the Gamecocks' swarming defense had earned the nickname Fire Ants. They forced Pitt into 4 turnovers and 8 punts.
Glavin facing a blitz is it. Fumbled the ball, and Carolina has it at the Gamecock 23.
The next stop was South Bend for the toughest test of the season. The Gamecocks played well, but were still down by 12 in the fourth quarter. Again, Mike Hold and company went to work.
Brambles out of the pocket. He's got running room. 30, 25, 20, 15. He's down to the 10, the 5, and he is in. Touchdown.
The Gamecocks outscored the Irish 22-6 in the final quarter and held on for a 36-32 upset victory.
Touchdown.
Morrison Speld continued to mystify opponents as the Cocks rolled over East Carolina, North Carolina State, and Florida State. After 9 games, the men in black were undefeated and ranked number 2 in the nation, the highest ranking ever achieved by a Gamecock team. Carolina fans were dreaming of an 11-0 season, but the midshipmen of Navy had other ideas. It seemed they could do no wrong as they upset Morrison's Magic 38-21. The next week, Carolina traveled to Death Valley, and the Magic returned, with Clemson leading 21-15 and time running out. The Gamecocks drove 84 yards to pay dirt.
It's caught at the 42-yard line. Still in the street is Chris Wade. With the football, Chris Lewis. He's down to the 30, to the Clemson 29-yard line. Cuts to the sideline, to the 20, to the 15, and he's out of bounds. And here's Hold, and he is in the end zone. Touchdown. The kick by Hegler is up, and this one is right up the middle, good. And Carolina has taken the lead over Clemson.
For November, it was a very sunny, hot day, and Coach Morrison came up to me at the half, and he goes, "How's everybody holding up under the heat?" And I said, "Well, they're doing good." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what," he said, "you guys keep after it." He said, "Because," he said, "they're fat, they're out of shape," and he said, "we'll kick their butts in the second half." And he was right.
That dream team of 1984 posted a 10-1 mark, the greatest season in the history of Gamecock football.
That's really probably my favorite team because of the charisma they had. They seemed to find a way to win. Of the 10 games they won, they were behind at one point or another in 8 of the games.
And most exciting was the crowd at the baseball park tonight when we arrived back at the Roost. Must have been 5,000 to 6,000 people out there. And once again, it meant a great deal to our players and to our coaching staff to have that great interest and great enthusiasm about the University of South Carolina football.
Morrison totally reworked his offense in 1986, installing a pro-style passing attack. Called the run and shoot, it was designed to highlight the skills of a highly recruited young quarterback named Todd Ellis. Although their team only won 3 games in '86, Carolina fans loved the new wide-open style of play. Gamecock spirit had never been higher.
When we went up in the fourth quarter and got ahead of Nebraska, I looked up and you could literally see the top deck moving. So, of course, if it ain't swaying, we ain't playing, came from that day, and I'll never forget that.
Ellis and his offense shifted into gear in 1987. The high-scoring attack helped the Cocks forge an 8-3 record at a trip to the Gator Bowl. They followed it the next season with an identical mark and a trip to the Liberty Bowl. The highlight, Morrison's first victory over Georgia since 1984. On February the 5th, 1989, Joe Morrison collapsed after playing racquetball at Williams-Brice Stadium. He later died of heart failure.
He was never a screamer or a yeller or a get-in-your-face kind of guy. He could say things in a calm, quiet manner that got his point across if you weren't playing as well as you could play.
The university quickly named Morrison's successor, a bright young coach who had been successful at Appalachian State, Sparky Woods. Consistently playing one of the toughest schedules in the country, Woods' scorecard read an even 500 through his first 3 seasons.
So difficult in coming in and with a person who had just passed away rather than if someone had left for other reasons. So we just want to be very careful and make sure that we didn't try to say this is the right way to do things. This is just our way of doing it, so it requires some change.
Over the last 30 years, Gamecock fans have learned pride and patience. The 1966 team won only 1 game. The 84 team lost only 1 game. But through it all, fan support has continued to grow. From an average of 40,000 a game in 1960, now to 72,000 a game. Week after week, year after year, these fans have seen some of the greatest athletes in the country perform right here. The Gamecocks have always won with defense, and the university has been blessed with many defensive stars. One was All-American Bobby Bryant. He set a standard for defensive backs in the mid-60s and was also a fine punt returner. He will be remembered most for his spectacular 98-yard return against North Carolina State in 1966. Another great defender who doubled as a return man was Dickie Harris. In 1970, he had a 97-yard kick return, a 96-yard punt return, and also returned an interception 94 yards for a touchdown. And of course, you can't talk about defense at Carolina without including consensus All-American linebacker James Seawright. The leader of Morrison's fire ant defense, Seawright remains the greatest linebacker to wear the garnet and black. On the offensive side, the Gamecocks have been blessed with 4 fine quarterbacks in the modern era. The first was Dan Reeves. He was a class act both on and off the field, and probably endured more punishment than any USC quarterback before or since.
Had a magnificent football mind as far as analyzing the other teams and picking out plays and picking out weaknesses. He could look at film. When he was 19 years old, he could study film and tell the coaches things that would happen that you could exploit, and they would always work out.
Dan Reeves went on to play for the Dallas Cowboys and is currently the head coach of the Denver Broncos. Another great quarterback was 5'9" Tommy Suggs. In the late 60s, he rewrote the record book for passing at USC. In 3 seasons, he passed for more than 5,000 yards and 34 touchdowns.
He was a leader. The ball players had great respect for him. He was not a tall quarterback. He was short, but he was a great scrambler. And if you needed something near the end of the game, he was the one to get it for you.
Another fine signal caller, Jeff Grants, was more feared as a runner than a passer. He broke the school record for single-game rushing yardage with 260 against Ohio in 1973.
Jeff Grant, when you get a quarterback of that, that's what you call a franchise. Jeff Grant, you don't coach Jeff Grant. He didn't go through spring practice with us. He played baseball. We lined him up. I made sure he got to the games on time. I made sure he got on the field and played. But he's an exceptional youngster. He could run the veer, and he could throw well enough to keep people offset.
Perhaps the best pure passer in Carolina history was Todd Ellis. He ran Joe Morrison's run and shoot to perfection and broke almost all Tommy Suggs' passing records in the process.
But it got so that teams did a pretty good job of defensing the run and shoot, and we just didn't have enough people sometimes to keep the opposing players off his back. As it was, he rewrote the passing record book here at Carolina. But what I'll remember about Todd Ellis way down the line, if I last that long, is the outstanding person he was. He was a gentleman and just a wonderful representative of the university, still is.
The Gamecocks have also had their share of great players at the other end of the pass. Receivers like Fred Ziegler, Philip Logan, and Robert Brooks. But probably the best of them all was Sterling Sharp. He holds South Carolina career receiving records with 169 catches for nearly 2,500 yards.
One-on-one, I don't think anybody could cover him. Even sometimes with double coverage, you couldn't take care of him. And wasn't surprised at all that he went to the pros. had the ability to get open, and even if he were not open, he could catch a ball in the crowd, and he made the big plays.
When it comes to putting points on the board, no player in any era compares with place kicker Colin Mackey, the Gamecocks' all-time leading scorer with 330 points. Included in his incredible career was 72 field goals and an unbelievable string of 92 straight extra points. Certainly the players who have received the most acclaim at Carolina have been the running backs. In the 60s, Warren Muir used his bruising style to gain All-American honors as a fullback. In the 70s, Clarence Williams and Kevin Long teamed up as the only USC runners to surpass the 1,000-yard mark in the same season. And in the 80s, Harold Green broke Steve Wadiak's career rushing totals and moved into second place in the all-time list. Of course, runners at Carolina will forever be compared with George Rogers. In his career, he ran for more than 5,200 yards and rushed for more than 100 yards in 37 games. He capped it off by becoming the only Gamecock in history to win the Heisman Trophy.
George was a hard-nosed. George got his shoulder knocked down, a dislocated shoulder against North Carolina State, and he played the next week. He came to us as a high school, after his high school senior year, he came over here with 2 broken thumbs. One he got in his last game at Duluth, they didn't repair it, and one he got in the Georgia All-Star game. He played with tremendous, tremendous pain. He took an awful lot of licks.
I'll never forget the game at Southern Cal. They had 11 men right up there, and they hit him so many times. Southern Cal beat Carolina that night, but Rogers did pretty well. And at the end of the game, every Southern California player came over and congratulated George Rogers. And when the opposing players do that, well, that's worth something.
Faded and cracked, the George Rogers mural on the USC campus is often passed by without a glance. But for Gamecock fans, the mental pictures of his record-breaking runs are still clear. Vivid memories of the greatest running back in Gamecock history.
If we could beat Clemson, we had a successful season.
Carolina-Clemson game is probably the biggest game I think played in the nation.
It was the game of the year.
Clemson is job one for us.
The seedbed of the aristocracy, declared Governor Ben Tillman. He was speaking of USC. He actually started Clemson University because he thought USC was spending farmers' money to educate lawyers. And for Pitchfork Ben, it was pure and simple. The bottom line was agriculture versus the aristocracy. Well, it was this debate that prompted 2,000 people to spend 25 cents each to see the first Carolina-Clemson game. Well, most thought it was nothing more than a sideshow at the 1896 State Fair, but it turned into one of the great collegiate rivalries of all time. Although aristocracy won that first contest, for Carolina, the bragging rights were brief. In the next 2 decades, Carolina managed just 2 victories to Clemson's 13. The event was even suspended from 1903 through 1908 after unruly fan behavior following the Gamecock victory of 1902. But with the return to play in 1909, it was obvious this game had outgrown its meager beginnings. It was a sideshow no more. It was an event. It was Big Thursday. Big Thursday became a social event. Women in their finest fashions, men dressed to the nines, and the rituals began to command the spotlight as well. The ringing of the Tower Bell, the fire at the gate of the Horseshoe, the burning of the tiger.
They used to have a tiger burning on the State House steps in Columbia, followed by a shirt-tail parade down Main Street, which often took them through theaters and stores and everybody else who was dismayed at the time.
Well, they brought me to Carolina to help them defeat Clemson.
In the early 20s, Tatum Gressett was the Big Thursday hero. Besides his drop-kick field goal to win the 1920 game, he also captained the 21 team that downed the Tigers 21-zip.
We wanted to beat Clemson just as bad then as the players want to do now, but we did. We didn't wait till next year. We had to do it then.
The 40s marked the beginning of the Frank Howard era at Clemson. The colorful Howard would eventually become known as the Dean of Carolina Clemson games. But in 1941, the Dean suffered his first defeat to Carolina. In what many call the most satisfying of all Big Thursday games, the Gamecocks won 18-14. It was the first win over the Tigers in 7 years, and Carolina fans were ecstatic.
And we were very pleased with that because Coach Rex Enright was given a Cadillac automobile after that game, and it was just a very thrilling experience. And as you said, the enthusiasm just bubbled over. They rang the school bell that night, all night, I think.
The Tigers staged a dramatic drive at the end of the game, but were stopped just short of the goal line. After hearing of Enright's gift, Coach Howard remarked, "The only difference between a Cadillac and a coffin is a few feet of dirt." Fans have come to expect the unexpected at Carolina Clemson games, and that was never more true than in 1946. That was the game in which a gang of counterfeiters printed and sold several thousand bogus tickets.
The gatekeepers could not tell which were legitimate tickets and which were bogus tickets, so ultimately they just caved in the gates, and there was the only vacant part in the stadium was the playing field itself, and they had to move spectators off the playing field several times out of the end zone so they could continue with the game.
My parents and my sister saw that game, and they had tickets in the end zone, but with the counterfeit tickets, they were unable to get to their seats, and they paid a kid $1 to get a Coca-Cola crate, because they still let them sell bottled drinks in the stadiums in those days, and they sat on a Coca-Cola crate on the ground on the sidelines to see that game.
But it was all worth it for the Gamecocks. Halfback Bobby Giles opened the scoring with a 62-yard touchdown run. Although Clemson fought back to take the lead 14-13, Carolina added 14 unanswered points to take the victory. During Rex Enright's final 7 seasons, the Gamecocks lost only once to the Tigers. Enright was a master at defending Clemson's single wing. So in 1954, Frank Howard tried something new.
Now we kind of hope they do run linebackers through, because they can't hit you but at one place, and we think that our offense is now set up to cut them off no matter where they come. And I would say that we got a good chance against them. I really think it's going to be a fine ball game, and either team might win.
Howard must have thought his luck was changing when the Tigers got a quick safety on this botched punt early in the game. But plays like this Mackey Prickett to Carl Brazel pass kept Clemson off stride all day, and Carolina won again, 13-8. Howard did post victories the next 3 years. Before the 1958 game, he swore that if Warren Gizey's Gamecocks could score a touchdown on his Tigers, he'd tip his hat after the score. Howard didn't expect Gizey to try anything he hadn't done in years past.
What really broke that game up altogether was we actually threw a forward pass, and we had a track player and Buddy Mayfield. He was a track star, and he had speed. He didn't play regularly, but they put him in, and we threw a deep pass, and he was 35 yards behind the nearest defender, because Frank just put all 11 men up on the line of scrimmage, knowing we weren't going to pass.
Howard did tip his hat to Gizey, and tipped it again and again and again. The Cocks won 26-6. Howard was heard to say, "The top of my head was getting sunburned." Despite the carnival atmosphere, the Tigers were growing tired of being the best attraction of Fair Week every year. They wanted a home field advantage too. Arguments were made for both sides, but in the end, Clemson won the right for a home-and-home series.
It's a shame that it could not have been continued as such, but I can understand Clemson's part. Well, I'll go down and play in the Devil's Den every year, you know.
So after 67 years, Big Thursday was no more. In 1960, Clemson hosted its first ever Carolina game. The Tigers won 12-2 in Warren Gizey's last game as head coach.
Some sports writer said, well, the Clemson game's coming up. What are you doing to prepare for it? I said, well, it's just another ball game. Probably the most ludicrous thing I ever said.
The 60s proved to be a decade of benchmarks. By 1962, the game was placed permanently as a season ender, increasing the rivalry even more. In '64, the Gamecocks got their first win in Death Valley, a victory Coach Bass called "my greatest win." In 1969, Carolina had already claimed its first ACC crown before the Clemson game, but that didn't mean they were going to take the Tigers lightly.
We were nervous and probably a little overconfident, I thought, going into the game in Columbia, and we were just scared that Clemson would upset us. And we probably played our best game all year long because we really were loose and very confident, and it was one of the most fun days I've ever had. And I remember it. I'll remember it the rest of my life. To take Carolina, all of us, back to its first bowl game in a long, long time, win the ACC championship, and then beat Clemson, and all that kind of wrapped up in one day.
Tommy Suggs never lost to Clemson in 3 varsity seasons. He recalled an incident his sophomore year that proved the intensity of the rivalry.
Our coaches came down the sideline and said, everybody put your helmet on. We played in Death Valley. And we didn't understand that. And he said, may get nasty up here, so you need to put your helmet on. So I put my helmet on. And literally, true story, walking off the field in the end zone, a lady had a stadium seat, one of these little metal stadium seats, and swung it at me and hit me in the head.
Coach Jim Carlin expected the usual bloody brawl when the Tigers entered the cockpit in 1975. But this Super Saturday would be one to remember for the Gamecocks. Carolina led 35-6 at the half. Even though Carlin was still wary of a Clemson comeback, it soon became obvious this was Carolina's day. 35-12, 42-12, 49-12, and finally one more score. A perfect pass from Jeff Grants to Stevie Stevens. The 56-20 final score prompted Tiger coach Red Parker to accuse Carlin of running up the score.
It's been a long time now, so a lot of people don't remember exactly what happened, but we were actually facing a 4th and goal to go at the 20-yard line at that time. 4th and goal to go, if you bring Bobby Marino in and kick a field goal, I would say that would be more so running the score up rather than, trying to go for a touchdown.
The 80s were lean years for Carolina. The only wins against Clemson came in that magical game in 1984. And in 1987, with the largest crowd to ever see a football game in Columbia, saw the Cocks win 20-7. All-American Brad Edwards picked off 2 Tiger passes and returned this one 40 yards for a touchdown. The senior safety net had 8 interceptions his final season and went on to a pro career with the Washington Redskins. And even though Sparky Woods has yet to taste victory against Clemson, he looks forward to the moment.
We have about 6 goals, and one of those goals is to beat Clemson. That'll always be one of those goals as long as I'm the head coach at South Carolina.
But as long as these 2 schools meet, the South Carolina-Clemson game will always be the biggest game of the year, period.
So how long can the Carolina-Clemson rivalry last?
It'll be there as long as there's life in a human being.
There's no doubt, as long as Clemson and Carolina continue to play football, brothers, best friends, even husbands and wives are going to split up and choose sides on one given Saturday each year. But times are changing. With South Carolina going into the SEC, new rivalries could be forming. I mean, along with the Tiger, there could be a burning of the Bulldog, maybe the Volunteers. But regardless, the Gamecocks are poised and ready to head into their 2nd century.
Playing 8 SEC schools every year, and then Clemson is a pretty hardy job for anyone. So, but it's going to be great fun. It's going to be great for our university, and we will win, and we will win in that league.
have regrets? Certainly, there's no doubt about that. But they're far outnumbered by the memories that I have that are so very, very positive, and the relationships that I took from it, the memories that I'll always have.
We were a real family, and it was, you know, nothing happened to somebody else that didn't hurt the rest of the team.
I try to recapture some of those memories that I had at Carolina, and I wished I could, because that was the best 4 years of my life, was going to the University of South Carolina.
We hail thee, Carolina, and sing thy high praise with loyal devotion, remembering the days. Whenever the song is sung, Gamecock followers are reminded of the players and coaches who forged South Carolina football of today. But perhaps it is their own loyal devotion that is most important. For South Carolina football to be successful in century number 2, they must find a new generation of great players and a new generation of Gamecock believers. Believers that are faithful to the last words of the song. When proudly we sought thee, thy children to be. Here's a health, Carolina, forever to thee. Here's a